3i Atlas may not be who they saw him as. The alien ship astrophysicist from Harvard Avi Loeb claims that it's not a comet at all, but rather, most likely, an alien craft. His suspicion is based on the very unusual trajectory of this object. According to the scientist, it's very unusual compared to others and the way other interstellar objects behave. 3i Atlas will be near Earth as early as November this year, and according to Loeb's predictions, humanity needs to be prepared for any possible scenario. Imagine that a seismosaurus suddenly appears on the street where your house is. What would you think in that critical moment? That can't be happening. A similar stunning effect was produced on scientists by the interstellar asteroid that is currently passing through the solar system in transit. Such visitors arrive here extremely rarely. In fact, only 2 interstellar objects not gravitationally bound to our common home have ever been recorded before. These are simply transit journeys, with the solar system as just another stop, like Shepetivka Station for Kyiv-Uzhhorod train passengers. What is this amazing ancient object? And could it, or its fragments, pose a threat to humanity's safety? Which interstellar asteroids have visited the solar system and been detected by Earth astronomers? And the main question is, does this event mean we are at risk of an alien attack? The object A11 Pi 3Z, or as it is officially called, 3i Atlas 2025, is a huge elongated boulder. The third confirmed interstellar asteroid has been closely observed for several months by the Chilean Atlas telescope, and data from June 14, 2025 confirmed the fact that this is indeed a visitor from deep space. A dilemma arises. Should the object be classified as an asteroid or a comet? The thing is, the closer the rock gets to the sun, the more it shows signs of comet-like activity. For example, it developed a small tail and a faint gas dust coma, so we might be dealing with an interstellar comet. As for the size of the object, there is no exact data yet, but most scientists estimate its diameter to be about 20 kilometers. Some structures on Earth still seem unimaginably huge to you. The Statue of Unity in Gujarat, the Burj Khalifa Tower, Mount Kilimanjaro, or Mount Everest. Now imagine 2.5 Everests combined into a single object, flying at a speed of 245,000 kilometers per hour. It significantly exceeds the required parameters to escape the sun's gravitational influence, since the third cosmic velocity for our system is 42 kilometers per second. The data is relevant near Earth, and the mentioned object is moving at a speed of 60 kilometers per second. This is further confirmation of its interstellar status. What other asteroids have visited the solar system? As alien objects, Oumuamua was officially recorded in 2017 and 2i Borisov in 2019. The latter is considered a comet that was ejected by some stellar system in ancient times. It may be located within a mass of asteroids similar to our Kuiper Belt. Why is 2i Borisov considered a comet? Because as it approached the sun, the object also showed distinct signs of an elongated tail. And to whom? Oumuamua is completely different. It's a full-fledged asteroid, but its cigar shape, which is not typical for such objects, once sparked a whole wave of idle speculation about the artificial origin of the visitor. However, its size doesn't even come close. It doesn't measure up to the hero of our video. Oumuamua's dimensions are only about 400 meters. Why the asteroid has such a shape and what gave it acceleration unrelated to the gravity of the solar system? There are still no answers to these questions. Perhaps we shouldn't rule out the theory of artificial origin, which the scientific community so actively opposes. Where do such objects come from? It is assumed that some of them may originate from distant regions of the solar system, such as the Oort cloud, or belong to long-period comets. The latter category most likely includes Comet Hale-Bopp, which was visible in 1996-1997 and has an orbital period of 2,500 years, as well as NEOWISE, discovered in the spring of 2020. Opinions about this object are divided, since its orbital period is 6,800 years. In this context, some asteroids located in the Kuiper Belt are also considered. Scientists consider them guests of the solar system primarily because of their unusual orbits, which are either too eccentric or hyperbolic. For example, asteroid 514,107 is thought to have been captured from interstellar space due to its unusual behavior compared to authentic objects. Several million years ago, stone visitors that arrived here from deep space can be compared to paleontological or archaeological discoveries. By studying them, we can gain invaluable information about locations we will never visit and may not even be able to see with advanced optics. But why do we detect interstellar wanderers so rarely? According to scientists' estimates, such asteroids and comets really do visit the solar system rarely. And that's not surprising, since the universe is vast and the Earth is just a tiny dot on its navigation charts. But still, it is believed that every year a few such objects drop by to visit us. So why don't we see them? Is it because they are either too dim or so tiny that Earth's telescopes simply can't detect them? But this situation can be solved. The new Vera Rubin Observatory is expanding the horizons of astronomical puzzles, and in the coming years, the list of interstellar objects will likely grow many times over. What else can we say about our main character? The interstellar asteroid, 3I Atlas. Besides its speed and size, its diameter ranges from 20 to 40 kilometers. It's worth mentioning its mass, which is 10 million times greater than that of Oumuamua, its distinctly hyperbolic orbit, and a trajectory that almost perfectly matches the plane of the ecliptic. The last two facts especially caught the attention of scientists, which is why astronomers classified the object as interstellar, meaning it is not bound to the solar system. Gravitationally, it will pass just inside Mars's orbit. The main question people have is whether this visitor threatens humans on Earth. After all, if an object with a diameter of 20 kilometers were to crash into Earth at incredible speed, it would definitely cause global catastrophic consequences. There would be an extinction of 80 to 100% of Earth's population, mega tsunamis and earthquakes, unprecedented volcanic activity, ecosystem collapse, and an asteroid winter. In fact, for such devastating consequences, an object 20 times smaller would be enough. But a rock that huge would most likely bury human civilization forever. But panic mongers can calm down. We can confidently say no. This asteroid is not dangerous for us. It will be on the opposite side of the sun and will peacefully leave the boundaries of our system to travel in the dead vacuum for millions more years. Listen to the sounds that will surround it on its journey. However, there is another danger that we will talk about. Where is A11 Pi 3Z now? Scientists have tracked its trajectory and found that around the middle of 2023, the asteroid passed Neptune's orbit, and now it is 4.5 astronomical units from the Sun between the orbits of Jupiter and the asteroid belt. Its trajectory is directed toward the constellation Sagittarius. Is it possible to observe the object? And is it most convenient to do so from Martian rovers? Is it possible to observe it from Earth? When is it expected to become brighter? This will happen at the end of summer or the beginning of autumn in 2025, and the object will be available for observation with amateur telescopes. Afterward, monitoring gets harder as 3I Atlas nears the Sun. Recently, the New York Post published an article in which journalists claimed that an alien artifact the size of Manhattan is approaching us. So in November-December, we must prepare for an external invasion. Such articles are not surprising because, as with other interstellar objects, speculation and conjecture could not be avoided here either. Respected figures have also suggested the asteroid may be artificial, including Harvard professor Avi Loeb, head of the Galileo Project. This provocateur in science has repeatedly made assumptions, not only about this interstellar object, but also about those that were detected earlier, claiming that they show signs of alien technology. None of this has been confirmed yet, though it sparks imagination and even frightens some people. In any case, if an alien fleet doesn't hover over Earth this winter, the object will gradually move away. In March 2026, it will fly by Jupiter, and it will visit Neptune again at the beginning of 2028. After that, it will head back into interstellar space. Studying such a massive celestial body discovered as it approaches the solar system, rather than when it's leaving, gives us a better chance to thoroughly investigate the asteroid. What do such studies mean for Earth science? They are of tremendous importance because astronomers will be able to study material from another star system, as well as gain a lot of information about the object's composition and its origin. Some astrophysicists suggest that the asteroid is an interloper from a region of the Milky Way, where about 2/3 of the stars in our galaxy are located. But why didn't it stay in its own stellar neighborhood and instead set off on a journey? Most likely the asteroid was ejected as a result of gravitational interaction with a gas giant comparable in size and mass to our Jupiter. However, this is just a hypothesis, and more accurate data will come after the object is studied. So, what did the asteroid 3I Atlas bring with it? Besides surprise, excitement, and concerns, it is a real window into other worlds, whose laws may differ significantly from ours, which will allow us to compare the processes of planet formation in the universe. In other words, this asteroid will demonstrate the unique features of its native star system, similar to Borisov's comet, which was found to contain a huge amount of carbon monoxide. What does this mean? This told astronomers that the object was formed in a very cold environment near a star, the absolute opposite of the Sun. In addition, interstellar objects can serve as time capsules for us, preserving priceless information about the early stages of evolution of ancient star clusters. Studying these asteroids and comets lets us examine non-gravitational acceleration, improve galaxy structure models, and measure interstellar medium density. But the best part is possibly finding signs of life. It's unlikely to be possible directly, but finding molecules with prebiotic properties could strengthen the panspermia hypothesis, which suggests that life and its components are transferred between objects in the universe. The final question is, how should this interstellar asteroid behave to make scientists and the public fall out of their chairs? For many years, the eyepieces of our telescopes have been intently peering into the darkness of space in search of wonders hidden in its mysterious depths. Meanwhile, there are plenty of unexplored objects in our solar system. Guess which planet is endlessly drenched by poisonous sulfuric rains, where the temperature is so high that even metals melt, on the surface of which celestial body is the atmospheric pressure, almost like in the Mariana Trench, right? This is the foggy, unexplored Venera. Very few spacecraft have visited it, but we've managed to gather some information about this planet, right? That's the current situation. At the same time, in the mid-20th century, astronomers knew almost nothing about Venera. Moreover, their ideas about it were completely wrong. Since ancient times, people believed that beneath our misty neighbor's thick clouds were paradise-like gardens. The few space probes that managed to visit Venera immediately dispelled these rosy illusions. However, let's take it step by step. Which countries have continuously competed with each other throughout modern human history? Most likely, even those who were born relatively recently know the answer to this question. It's the Soviet Union and the United States of America. It's noteworthy that the Soviet Union achieved significant success in the space race at the end of the 20th century and this also included organizing missions to Venus. But in this matter, not everything went smoothly, especially because of incorrect information about the second planet of the solar system, which was based on illusions and assumptions. Why is Venus considered Earth's sister? It really is similar to our planet in a number of ways, for example, in terms of mass and size. But that's where the similarity ends, as it turned out later, because Venus even rotates in the opposite direction. Among other things, it is shrouded in a deadly atmosphere made mostly of sulfuric acid, and the temperature on its surface is high enough to melt any object that lands on it from outside. This makes Venus the hottest celestial body in the solar system. What spacecraft have ever studied this rocky, deadly trap? As already mentioned, the pioneers in this field were the Soviet probes, particularly the Venera and Vega series. It all began in 1961 with the Venera 1 space probe. Unfortunately, the tasks assigned to this interplanetary station were not fully accomplished. However, the probe became the first to fly quite close to the surface of Venus. This metal cylinder was equipped with state-of-the-art technology, if you can say so, for the 1960s. What gadgets was Venera 1 equipped with? First of all, it was a magnetometer, a Geiger counter, a cosmic radiation detector, and also ion traps. Early in the morning on February 12, 1961, the probe was launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Many of you may ask, were those instruments useful if the mission never reached its goal? Partially, yes. For example, Venera 1, after leaving Earth's vicinity, immediately transmitted information about the solar wind and cosmic rays permeating the area around our planet. The spacecraft maintained this performance throughout its journey, even nearly 2 million kilometers from its alma mater. Unfortunately, it was at this point that contact with Venera 1 was irretrievably lost. It is known that on May 19 and 20 of the same year, the interplanetary station passed at a distance of 100,000 kilometers from Venus, after which it set off on an endless journey around the sun. This mission failed due to poor decisions made by the spacecraft team. For example, decisions about communication sessions were made on board the station, not at the Mission Control Center. Activating onboard automation on a schedule made controlling the spacecraft much harder. Overall, conclusions were drawn, so the mission, although not very successful, still bore fruit in terms of future work. Perhaps after the failure of the Venera 1 probe, everything went smoothly. Absolutely not. There were still dozens of draft versions that, for various reasons, never made it to the cloud-covered planet. The Venera 2 interplanetary station missed its target, but still gathered some scientific data. The Venera 3 probe made the first hard landing on the planet's surface, making it the first spacecraft to reach another celestial body. But this interplanetary station did not transmit any data about the surface of Venus, since the spacecraft's control system failed much earlier. As a result, after several fruitless or only partially successful attempts, the first probes that studied the mysterious planet for the longest time were Venera 13 and Venera 14. You're expecting hundreds of images from these spacecraft. I don't want to disappoint you, but the technology back then wasn't that advanced. So Venera 13 transmitted only 22 images to Earth, most of which were in color. Both probes studied the atmosphere, soil, and temperature conditions of the planet. The devices operated for 57 to 127 minutes each. In such hellish conditions, that's quite a lot, especially considering that initially only half or even a third of that time was planned. It's worth noting that the other devices, including Vega, Magellan, Galileo, Akatsuki, Venus Express, and others, either flew by, studied the atmosphere, or became artificial satellites of Venus. Thus, no one has surpassed the achievements of those two nearly simultaneous probes. The distance between Venera 14 and Venera 13 is 950 kilometers. Both probes landed in the so-called Phoebe region, which has a diameter of almost 3,000 kilometers. The research sent by the Venera 13 and Venera 14 spacecraft is unique. Undoubtedly, these include the sounds of a distant, almost unexplored planet, as well as its panoramic images. This was made possible thanks to the new generation equipment with which the probes were equipped. On board, they installed 14 scientific gadgets, including a spectrometer, an accelerometer that measures the projection of apparent acceleration, a nephelometer necessary for chemical analysis of particles, periphotometric cameras, a chemical reaction detector, a gas chromatograph based on the method of separating substances, an ultraviolet photometer, a hydrometer, and many other valuable research instruments designed by Soviet, French, and Austrian specialists. During the descent into the atmosphere of Venus, radius seismograph first recorded numerous discharges of powerful lightning by the Venera 14 and Venera 13 probes. Immediately after landing, the probes transmitted panoramic images showing the fine-grained soil of our closest neighbor. Both devices recorded the temperature on the surface of Venus, and its readings amazed scientists: over 460 degrees Celsius. If it weren't for the titanium casing in which the probes were encased, the operation of the devices at a pressure of 90-96 bar would have been instantly terminated, as had happened before. So what did the cameras of the probes capture? The first ones? It turned out that Venus is an absolutely lifeless, gloomy, and dangerous world. The surface of the planet is covered with brown soil, boulders, a network of fractures called arachnoids, ancient craters, and mountains. The climate here is harsh, and this news, received from the probes, greatly disappointed the supporters of the theory that Venus is similar to Earth during the tropical Carboniferous period. However, it was later found that if it weren't for the thick cloud cover, the surface of the planet wouldn't be so hot and stifling. The temperature most likely wouldn't exceed 80 degrees. In any case, it's obvious that this grotesque world is completely waterless and dead. As for thunderstorms, the first similar phenomena were recorded by the Venera 2 spacecraft, but at that time, scientists decided that it was just radio interference. And for dessert, the most interesting thing, what does Venus sound like, whose voices can be heard in the noise of its winds? It is known that the planet is involved in one global hurricane, with winds blowing at different speeds depending on the location. The probe recorded the sounds of Venus during its descent, and so far, this is the only voice that has reached us from this amazing world located hundreds of millions of kilometers from Earth. In the dense cloud layer, the interplanetary spacecraft was flying through. Wind speeds reach 300 meters per second or more. That's why right now you hear the noise, moans, and howling of the Venusian atmospheric currents. The strange booming sounds probably indicate thunder following the blinding lightning that streaks across the skies of this planet. But what the measured scraping sound that gradually turns into a hum means has not yet been determined. Perhaps we are hearing the voice of the spacecraft itself as it applies emergency braking in the atmosphere. But this is not certain. One thing is clear, the planet did not welcome the foreign probe very hospitably, grumbling and protesting against this intrusion as much as it could. Is this really the last thing we will see and hear about our closest neighbor? Especially now, when all attention is focused on the future colonization of Mars. But despite everything, interest in Venus does not fade. Several countries, the United States, India, and Russia, are developing orbital probe projects that will be sent to study this amazing planet. However, this will not happen before the late 2020s. It's encouraging that while we wait for this significant event, humanity no longer harbors illusions about the Mesozoic era supposedly reigning on Venus. Therefore, we won't be disappointed by the grim and harsh reality. Subscribe to our channel, and at the same time, let's think about whether it's ever possible to terraform this unfriendly and completely alien planet to humans. Mentions of comets can be found in many ancient cultures. These objects were observed even by people who lived before our era. It's not surprising that many legends and tales were associated with comets. They were considered a kind of messenger. With the development of science, we learned about the origin and nature of these cosmic objects. It's a cluster of ice and metals that develops a tail when it approaches the sun. In this video, you'll learn which comet humanity has been studying since the time of the Egyptian pharaohs. Why does the Churyumov-Gerasimenko comet have such a strange shape, and what discoveries can we make about our planetary system based on the study of comets? One of the most famous comets is Halley's Comet, officially designated as 1P Halley. The first mentions of it date back to 2040 before Christ. You can see this object in the sky every 75 years. The comet was seen multiple times at different periods in the night sky, but people thought it was a different celestial body each time. This was the case until the 17th century, when the scientist Edmund Galea put forward the theory that it was the same object. He closely observed the comet in 1680 and suggested that it could be seen again in the night sky in 75 years. When it turned out that this assumption was true, the comet was named after Galea. So what have scientists learned about this object since then? We have obtained a lot of new information about the structure of the comet's surface. With the help of the European Interplanetary Station Giotto and the Soviet Vega spacecraft, in 1986, they approached Halley's Comet at a very close distance. No other research spacecraft had done anything like this. Previously, two identical probes, Vega 1 and Vega 2, had been made for the Vega Interplanetary Station. Their design consisted of flyby descent modules. These two probes were supposed to reach Venus and deploy landing modules onto its surface for a detailed study of the celestial body's properties. In addition, Vega 1 and Vega 2 were supposed to approach 1 pH at a close distance. The problem was that it was impossible to know exactly where the comet would be at a specific point in time, and there was a risk that the probes would not arrive at the right location. Nevertheless, the Soviet scientists were lucky, and in March 1986, the Vega 1 spacecraft ended up near Halley's Comet. They were separated by 8,879 kilometers, and using data from the Soviet spacecraft, the European Giotto station's approach to the comet became much more precise. It set out to fulfill its mission a few years later, in July 1985. From the very beginning, it was planned that its task would only be to fly close to the nucleus of Halley's Comet. Less than a year later, in March 1986, the spacecraft flew by it at a distance of 596 kilometers, but there were still some losses. Giotto's camera was damaged, so the spacecraft was out of order for a while after the Vega and Giotto's spacecraft were launched. Scientists obtained some important data. In particular, they learned what the comet's tail looked like up close, and its length can reach up to 100 million kilometers. This part may differ in its external characteristics depending on the conditions in which the comet was formed. For example, some tails have a bluish tint, while others may be uneven and slightly curved. Throughout its existence, Comet 1P Halley has had tails with very different characteristics. Another interesting detail concerns the nucleus of Halley's Comet. It is small in size, although its coma is much larger. The density of 1P Halley reaches 600 kilograms per cubic meter, which is even less than that of water. After analyzing images from the Giotto spacecraft, scientists found the nucleus surface covered with irregularities, including mountain ridges and small hills. It is also known for sure that there is at least one crater there. The study of the comet's structures continued, so we found out that the gases released from the nucleus are mostly water vapor, with carbon monoxide, about 3% carbon dioxide, and a minimal amount of methane. Moreover, with each return of Halley's Comet, its nucleus gradually loses weight, and its mass is now only about 10–20% of the original. The comet's surface typically heats to +30 to plus 130 degrees C. From this, we can conclude that most of the nucleus is covered by a layer of dust that prevents it from being active. This is because the surface simply absorbs the light. Based on all the data we've gathered about 1P Halley, we can say for sure that it contains mostly non-volatile materials, mainly substances like ammonia, carbon, methane, and water. The speed of this celestial body is about 70 km/s. Calculations show the comet could have spent 16,000 to 200,000 years on its current orbit. Scientists say Halley's comet will soon reach its farthest point at the end of 2023. We won't see it near Earth until 2061. Once the celestial object leaves Halley 1, it will begin getting closer to the Sun. Of course, besides Halley's comet, there are others that are just as interesting, like Churyumov-Gerasimenko's comet. It was first noticed by the Soviet scientist Klim Churyumov in October 1969. He used photographs that were taken by another Soviet scientist, Svetlana Gerasimenko. In fact, the comet was named after them. In the year, the automatic interplanetary station Rosetta landed on the surface of the object. This spacecraft was launched back in 2004 with the goal of obtaining more data about the properties of the comet in order to later form a clearer picture of the formation of our planetary system. After 10 years, Rosetta was able to reach the chosen space object. No research probe had ever done this before. A few months later, the lander called Philae landed on the comet. That's how we learned about the temperature of the comet's upper layer, the size of its nucleus, and the structure of the object. The surface of the comet has a temperature range from 183 to 143 degrees Celsius. Another surprising fact was that the nucleus is not round or oval in shape, but rather resembles two connected formations, one large and the other smaller. Together, their total length is about 4 kilometers. Why did such a strange shape form? It's all about how the comet was formed. Most likely, there was a collision between two celestial bodies, which then became one. Thanks to the data sent to Earth by the Rosetta station, scientists found molecules of 16 organic compounds on the surface, 4 of which had not previously been detected on other celestial bodies. The amazing discoveries didn't end there. Later, elements of molecular oxygen and ice were found on the comet. This fact undermined one of the popular theories. Which one exactly? During the construction of the Rosetta spacecraft, its assembly was carried out in an absolutely clean room, because later, researchers assumed that they would be able to find particles on it that would indicate the formation of organic life. Heavier water molecules than those on Earth. Thus, the prevailing theory at the time that such objects could bring water to Earth turned out to be invalid. The object completes a full rotation around its axis in 12 hours and 24 minutes. At the moment, it is known that the mass of the Churyumov-Gerasimenko comet is about 10 billion tons. The comet was closest to our planet in August 2015, and in March 2021, it will not return to Earth for the next 200 years. Space science is rapidly advancing and has made great progress in studying comets. This is especially important because it allows us to learn more about what our planetary system was like at the beginning of its formation and how life began on Earth. The aforementioned theory that water appeared on our planet, thanks to comets, may still be confirmed in the course of further research. Comets of a different type than Churyumov-Gerasimenko may well be involved here. Perhaps in the future, we will understand how valuable these objects are to us. Nuclear war became a realistic horror story for humanity from the moment the world realized the level of danger posed by weapons of mass destruction. Since then, people have come up with increasingly sophisticated questions, such as whether it is possible to blow up the moon, or what would happen if we triggered the simultaneous detonation of our nuclear stockpiles. First, Let's find out what Earth's assets are. There are currently 15,000 nuclear warheads stored on the planet, most of which belong to the United States and Russia. With that number of bombs, you could, if you wanted, pile up an island the size of Manhattan and build all the world's known skyscrapers on it. But let's move from colorful comparisons to grim reality and suppose that this deadly arsenal is gathered in one global hangar. Imagine that the presidents of the world's powers have gone mad and decided to blow it up. How devastating would the consequences be? To begin with, let's make a brief reference to a well-known fact. In 1883, the Indonesian volcano Krakatau erupted, claiming the lives of 36,000 island inhabitants and nearly destroying the archipelago. The force of the explosion was equivalent to 200 megatons of trinitrotoluene. For comparison, a Minuteman III warhead has 300 kilotons. As a result, within a radius of 250 kilometers, due to the rapid release of dust up to 80,000 meters high, day literally turned into night. The shock wave circled the globe several times, and the sounds of the eruption were heard at a distance of 5,000 kilometers. Why do we need this information? Right now, there are 4,500 cities on Earth with populations of about 100,000 people. Of course, there are towns that are smaller and much larger, but we'll take the average value. 3 bombs are enough to destroy each of them. So by dropping warheads all at once, you could make all the cities instantly blow up, leaving not a single stone standing, and half of the world's population would disappear in an instant. And that's just from a single strike. We'll still have 1,500 warheads left in reserve, but that's just a warm-up. The real question is what it would look like if 15,000 warheads detonated all at once. The warheads would have the effect of 15 Krakatoa eruptions. The scene would be so terrifying and grotesque that witnesses in the first moments most likely wouldn't believe their own eyes. In a flash, as if from underground, a blinding fireball with a diameter of 50 kilometers will rise up, and the shock wave will immediately destroy buildings, trees, and everything else within an area of about 3,000 hectares. All areas within 250 kilometers of the explosion's epicenter will be incinerated. The shock wave will circle the Earth for weeks, and the sound won't be limited to 5,000 kilometers, like with the Krakatoa eruption. The noise will be clearly heard in every corner of the world. All of this will happen immediately, but what will happen next? Even for events of this kind, much smaller in scale. The most terrifying part happens later. That's when the living begin to envy the dead and regret not having received an instant death, instead facing a painful and slow demise. And here's what will happen next. A nuclear mushroom cloud will rise up to 50 kilometers and reach the stratosphere, so the explosion will even be felt by astronauts on the International Space Station. A crater-shaped scar about 10 kilometers wide will remain on Earth's surface. The affected area will be engulfed in fires. Radiation will spread across the planet and begin to cling, returning to reap its terrible harvest. The number of cancer cases will sharply increase, and those who do not die from the listed disasters will face a prolonged nuclear winter. And this means mass starvation, terrible diseases, and the extinction of most of humanity. Obviously, nuclear weapons are one of the most nightmarish and destructive inventions, but whether they are capable of destroying an entire planet is a complicated question. And the answer is both yes and no. This question was raised by physicists and volcanologists who came to ambiguous conclusions. First of all, the enormous stone sphere with a diameter of 12,742 kilometers. That is, our Earth cannot be destroyed even by the current nuclear arsenal. This wouldn't happen even if we extracted all the uranium from the Earth's interior and made 10 trillion bombs equivalent to those dropped on Hiroshima. Secondly, if we are not able to split the Earth, then, as physicists claim, it is theoretically possible to shift it from its orbit, for example, by stopping the planet's rotation. Scientists have calculated that to do this, it would be necessary to simultaneously detonate 600 quintillion, that's a number with 18 zeros, bombs, each with a yield of at least 1 megaton in trinitrotoluene equivalent. In that case, the Earth would most likely stop and fly toward the Sun, since our star is the nearest object with significant gravity. Naturally, this would mean the certain destruction of the planet. Volcanologists, however, do not share the physicists' confidence and insist that even the eruptions of the Yellowstone supervolcano, which has erupted 142 times over 17 million years, were not able to knock the Earth off its orbit or send it toward the blazing solar corona. So it is highly doubtful that humanity could achieve this, especially since it is hardly possible to create enough bombs to destructively affect the rotation of our planet. But any arguments pale in comparison to the following fact, every single one of them. Scientists, regardless of their specialization, unanimously insist that it is necessary to drastically reduce the buildup of weapons, because we are sitting on a powder keg that could explode at any moment and kill its creators, as well as billions of their fellow humans. Just think about it by appearance. Even a nuclear conflict between small states would have planetary consequences, resulting in lasting climate change, the emergence of mutations and incurable diseases, as well as widespread famine. A large-scale war between superpowers would almost certainly throw humanity back into the embrace of the Stone Age. Year after year, telescopes discover new worlds in the universe, unusual, astonishing, and dangerous. But, as a character from a famous work once said, you don't have to look far for that. Who has the devil on their shoulder? Which neighboring planet of Earth caused the greatest disappointment among astronomers? On which celestial body? Are these conditions too extreme even for extremophile bacteria? Where did probes detect unexplained movement on the dead surface of a planet? On which object in the solar system? Due to the high pressure, any gas turns into a supercritical fluid. All of this is present on Venus. Why did astronomers once feel deceived? The fact is that until the mid-20th century, due to the thick layer of clouds, optical observations of Venus were impossible, so nothing was known about the conditions on its surface. Ignorance creates myths. Therefore, not only ordinary people but also renowned scientists believed for a long time that Venus was similar to Earth. Pure rivers flowed, green forests rustled, and the only difference was that the climate was warmer than on our planet. Because of its proximity to the sun, astronomers were convinced that behind the clouds there was some kind of tropical world, similar to Earth during the Mesozoic era. So what turned out to be the reality? As soon as the first interplanetary spacecraft, made of titanium and steel alloy, reached the surface of Venus, it was instantly crushed like a tin can. The illusions were instantly dispelled. It turned out that the conditions on this planet were far from paradise. If there were ever giant ferns growing there and giant lizards roaming around, all of that was burned away long ago by sulfuric rains and killed by the infernal heat. What spacecraft visited Venus and what were they able to see? After a series of failed missions, when interplanetary stations either got lost on the way or communication with them was interrupted for various reasons, the Venera series probes transmitted the first images from the surface of the planet. These images caused a real shock in the scientific community because, as we already mentioned, the expectations were completely different. It turned out that beneath the extremely dense layer of Venusian clouds, there is an absolutely lifeless rocky desert with a temperature of about plus 460 to 480 degrees Celsius and atmospheric pressure 92 times stronger than on Earth. To top it all off, clouds made mostly of concentrated sulfuric acid hung gloomily over this branch of hell. It's no wonder that not a single Earth probe has survived on the surface of Venus for more than 2 hours. It might seem silly to ask if there was ever life on Venus after all that. But despite everything, this question has been debated by scientists for a long time until astronomers reached a definitive conclusion. Initially, during their formation, Earth and Venus were very similar, and even now, many parameters of these neighboring planets are almost identical: gravity, chemical composition, and size. First and foremost, science wants to know if there is water on Venus. At the moment, it is present only in the atmosphere and in absolutely negligible amounts. So negligible that if it were to be condensed and poured onto the surface of the planet, the water layer would be only 3 centimeters thick. For comparison, if all the water on Earth were distributed evenly, it would form a layer 3 kilometers deep. But there used to be water on Venus, most likely billions of years ago. At the dawn of the planet's formation, there was much more water on it. This is also confirmed by interplanetary spacecraft that have ever flown past Venus or are operating in its orbit, where almost all the water has disappeared. Some astrophysicists suggest that it was destroyed by harsh ultraviolet radiation. The water molecules simply broke down into atoms and were carried away by the solar wind. Therefore, if any primitive forms of life are possible on Venus now, it would only be in the upper layers of the atmosphere, far from the uninhabitable surface. It's unlikely that there were rivers, seas, and oceans on the planet a long time ago. The French scientist Eric Chaussefir developed a computer model according to which there could never have been any bodies of water on Venus. However, we shouldn't dismiss the idea that comets occasionally brought water to the planet's surface. That is, we cannot completely deny the possibility of primitive forms of Venusian life that may have developed in water. But at the moment, it seems that, just like in Wells's novel where the inhabitants of the moon replaced iron with gold, on Venus, someone has replaced water with sulfuric acid. What does the surface look like? The most detailed map of the planet so far was created by the Magellan probe, which photographed about 98% of Venus's surface. The spacecraft was put into orbit back in 1990, and as it approached, it gradually mapped sections of the planet. This enabled a 3D model of Venus's surface. What is the terrain like beneath its dense clouds? Before Magellan, 2 other probes, Venera 15 and Venera 16, also tried to map the planet, but they were much less successful. Here, for example, is an image of several lava flow channels that Magellan managed to capture. The structures are clearly visible, and the photo is quite detailed. On Venus, there are 2 so-called continents, Ishtar Terra and Aphrodite Terra. The highest mountains on the planet are located there, and the surface is also covered with canyons. However, there are very few impact craters on Venus, and Magellan photographed one of them. But the strangest surface structure is the arachnoids, which are found exclusively on the surface of Venus. Mostly these huge stone swirls, most likely of volcanic origin, are located in the northern hemisphere of the planet. They really do look like spiders, which is why they have that name. The average diameter of an arachnoid is about 200 kilometers. There are 256 such structures found on the planet, but the principle of their formation is not fully understood. How high are the Venusian mountains? The enormous volcano Mott rises 5 kilometers above the surrounding terrain and almost 9 kilometers above the average surface level, while the Maxwell Mountains are even higher. They reach 11 kilometers, making them the most significant mountain system on Venus. Both images were provided by the Magellan spacecraft during its detailed mapping. It's a remarkable fact, considering the monstrous heat on Venus, that at the summit of the Maxwell Mountains it's a bit cooler, only plus 380 degrees Celsius. The atmospheric pressure there is also twice as low as on the surface, but still 44 times higher than on Earth. The Maxwell Mountains are the most suitable site for landing terrestrial rovers. The problem is that we still can't build a device capable of staying in this extremely inhospitable world for a long time. Are there atmospheric phenomena on Venus? Obviously, since the atmosphere is very dense and deadly, the planet does have an atmosphere, but all the atmospheric phenomena here come with the prefix hyper. If there are winds, they reach up to 500 km/h. The planet can basically be considered as being caught in one giant global hurricane. If there are lightning strikes, they burn right through the sulfuric clouds. If there are temperatures, they're like those in a blast furnace. By the way, computer simulations suggest that without the greenhouse effect, the surface temperature on Venus wouldn't exceed 80 degrees Celsius. Are there any future missions to Venus planned? And are they considered a priority? At the moment, however, several countries, particularly India, as well as the European Space Agency and National Aeronautics and Space Administration, are developing orbital spacecraft that are planned to be launched in the next few years to our cloudy neighbor. The predecessors of these automatic stations not only photographed Venus, some of them managed to record what the planet sounds like. The first to do this was the Venera 13 spacecraft, which also sent color images of the planet back to Earth. The probe operated for 127 minutes instead of the planned 32 before it failed. This became possible because the body was pre-cooled before landing, and all the instruments were housed in an ultra-sealed titanium casing. Venera 13's most important achievement was recording the planet's sounds for the first time. So far, no other spacecraft has repeated this achievement. On the recording, you can clearly hear the howling of the wind and sounds similar to thunder. But in the summer of 2020, another exclusive event occurred. The Parker Solar Probe, while flying past Venus, this was its third flyby of the planet, recorded the singing of its ionosphere. Of course, these aren't sounds from the surface, but the vibrations of the ionosphere were also recorded for the first time. No spacecraft before this had shared such information with Earth. This is what the night side of Venus sounds like. Truly impressive. By the way, the Parker probe will regularly fly by Venus for many years, delighting us with new data. Along with it, the Solar Orbiter probe and the Mercury Orbiter Bepi-Colombo will also periodically visit the vicinity of the planet. Do these interplanetary stations have any chance of finding even the slightest signs of life on Venus? At the moment, the conditions on this planet are, without exaggeration, unbearable. However, in Venus's upper atmosphere and interior, there's still a small chance of finding biosignatures, possibly as bacterial colonies in the clouds. For example, in 2020, the James Clerk Maxwell Telescope discovered a marker of life in the atmosphere of Venus. This is the gas phosphine, the appearance of which cannot be explained by abiogenesis processes, the origin of life from non-living matter. So scientists concluded that phosphine appeared as a result of the activity of certain types of microbes. It remains a mystery how they survived in this hell, but perhaps some geochemical or photochemical processes are simply unknown to our astrobiologists. Glycine was also found in the atmosphere, but its concentration was detected at a higher altitude than phosphine. In any case, according to some data, when our star and the planets were young, the intensity of the sun was about 70% of its current level. It's quite possible that Venus was the most suitable for the emergence of life among all the celestial bodies in the system. It's just that over time, the conditions changed drastically, and now we see a rather discouraging picture. Do you think this stops scientists from putting forward fantastic hypotheses about life on the planet's surface? You're mistaken. In January 2012, when studying images received from the Venera 13 and Venera 14 probes, it was discovered that some objects in the photos would disappear and then reappear. What conclusion was drawn? Leonid Xanfomaliti, a researcher at the Institute of Space Research, suggested the hypothesis that the noise from the landing of the probes scared the inhabitants of Venus, forcing them to hide. If you carefully examine the panorama of Venus from March 1982, you can clearly see that some objects disappeared, leaving traces behind, and then reappeared, all within the 2-hour recording period. Here is documentary evidence of this strange and still unexplained phenomenon. Why weren't these life forms incinerated by the Venusian heat? What exactly gives energy to these strange creatures? Perhaps these are nitrogen-based biosignatures. Too many questions, too few answers. Most likely, if we ever learn anything about this, it won't happen anytime soon. But no one stops us from speculating and thinking about it. So go to the comments and share your own hypotheses to challenge the scientific ones. Well, Earthlings, this isn't the end of the video. We still have some very interesting and truly spectacular episodes ahead. But for me to keep delighting you with all the characters of the universe, I need your feedback. You can express it quite simply. You just need to leave an electronic like under this video, since we simply don't have any other kinds of likes. And continue the phrase, I know. This way, you'll let me know that we're moving in the right direction. Stay tuned.